Hey there. I thought I'd make a little video about the fun I'm having with Solitaire ASL. Um, I love ASL, but it's a humongous beast, and it takes when you're learning, as I still am. It takes a long time to play because um, although you sort of understand most things, as soon as you start doing something a bit out of the ordinary, you have to check the rule book and so forth. But part of the fun of ASL is actually learning it, just immersing yourself in it. It's also kind of like a hobby in itself. I see over there I've been organising counters, just, in a small way. I got Americans here and saving tea boxes. I've also been reorganising these. Also got all the vehicles and so forth and organising. So there's a lot of organising and preparation that goes into it. For example, what I'm playing is Solitaire ASL, and it's a great system. Some say it's not really ASL, and I understand why. It is ASL in the sense that it uses exactly the same rules, but then it adds more on top. It takes away a few. For example, because the system is playing the enemy, you don't go through all the same procedures for if the enemy is firing off-board artillery, as the friendly player would if they're firing off-board artillery. So you don't always use all the same procedures, but it's still all the same rules. If, as the friendly player, you are playing them, it's just truncated a bit for the enemy. But the biggest difference, perhaps, in it is the command controls. So you roll every time a unit makes an action. When the enemy unit makes an action, you roll for which action it's doing, and on a doubles, depending on the morale or the state of the unit, it might panic, which means it will do nothing that turn, and the same can happen to yours. When one of your units is going to perform an action beyond, I think, like rallies, you roll and a morale roll with some modifiers, and they might panic. If you are panicked, you can shoot at an enemy who come adjacent and or into your same hex, but otherwise you're not doing anything else. So what this means is you don't have the perfect control of all your units you have in normal ASL. And so in SASL, Solitaire ASL, you have to take care of contingencies that may or may not happen. So you have to be really careful with your attacks, because you don't know if your attack's going to go through exactly as planned. You have to have a backup or something like that, and backup in your defence and so forth. Well, I'm saying this though I know much about it. I don't. I've played ASL on and off for 8 or 10 years, mostly off. So I'm still a newbie to it. But recently started a Vassal. That's an online game with a friend, and that spurred me to get back into it. Because, like I say, I love the system. It's just there's so much to it. It's a bit of an unwieldy beast. Until I guess you've learnt how to ride that thing, and so I'm still learning. It's a bit like learning a language as well, in the sense that Solitaire ASL, I think, is great. You can practice the language, you can practice all the rules and so forth, but it isn't really until you get to speak with another person that you're really going to have the real sort of full-on practice of playing ASL or speaking it, a foreign language. So that's when it really comes in. So but anyway, one of the beautiful thing about Solitaire ASL, like I said, you can use it to learn the rules. And what I decided I would do a campaign game. So you can either do one-off games, and in Solitaire ASL you have missions. So you don't take a regular scenario and convert it to solitaire play. You play solitaire missions, so they're specially tailored, and they're kind of generic missions like enemy patrol or something like that, or holding the line. And that gives some special scenario, special rules. That then you roll random boards for terrain, perhaps some overlays and so forth. You sort of roll out what's going to happen. You roll out what your force is going to be. You basically have a platoon, and then you play that mission. Now, because my ASL stuff is scattered, and I thought I had most or all of it here, but I found I've only got, in terms of the units, the counters, Germans, Russians and US, and with me here. So I've played enough Russians. I thought I'd try Germans versus US. So I thought, okay, I'll start a campaign in June 43 with the Normandy landings, and I randomly rolled up a starting mission, and as chance would have it, I rolled up beach defence. Perfect. So here we have my little section of the Normandy landings, and it's just great. That was a stupendous serendipity. So I prepared everything, and of course although I believe I have them in that stacked somewhere in the UK, I didn't have the ocean and beach overlays, so I had to sort of scratch some together myself, like this. But essentially, and I think I might have the ocean a bit too long, so normally they probably wouldn't take quite so long. I'm not sure, because I was judging from the overlays that, looking online at the actual overlays. So I'm not sure about that. I might not. But anyway, so what I ended up with, very interesting situation. You can see it's essentially like an airfield. So I guess my platoon has been charged with defending this airfield. Then you have, that's classed as a kind of a village board, so it's got a fair few buildings as well. Then we had a farm board here. You can see lots of grain. And it being June, the grain is in season. Otherwise, that would just be open ground. And then at the edge of that board, just dictated purely randomly, could have come along this edge, but it came along. That would have been much better for me, because I think that's less protection. It gives me a greater depth defence. At least it felt better when originally I thought it was there, but I checked what I'd done, and then I realised no, it should have been the lengthwise here. So we've got a very long beach section there. It's just one hex, and then all of this ocean, and there should be another hex of ocean there and another hex of ocean there, just to bring it to the edges of the boards. And then you roll for the amount of S counters. So where are they? I think I've got rid of them because I've got through that stage. So you start with it's different in each mission, but in this mission, because you've got the beach, the enemy is assaulting the beach and you're defending the beach. They have all these suspect counters, and I rolled up 70, so essentially there will be 70 suspect counters come on. I don't know, they may or may not be units, and you also have to check for the activation number, and I rolled the highest, so if say it was 4 on a d6 of 4 or less, each of those suspects would be something more or less more likely. I happened to roll 5, so the highest amount, not the highest amount of suspects necessarily for this scenario. You roll 2d6 and then add 4 and times that by 10. Yeah, and so I have 70, and essentially they start off embarked on watercraft. So instantly what I had here was I had to learn about watercraft, and in this case landing craft. There's also like boats and rafts, but they're not necessarily for this. Beaches, and all the rules that go with them. So essentially what I rolled up was I got a steep beach. So this is very steep slope which means that the beach is actually one level below this. It could have been a slow, slightly sloping beach or a moderate one, in which case they would have been the same level. But no, we got a steep drop from here. This is called the hinterland. The edge of the hinterland down to the beach is one level. Then there's the ocean, which goes out from that. And it being a steep beach, it's hard sand. It could have been soft sand. And then there's 1 hex of shallows. If it was a slightly sloping, there could have been 3 hexes of shallows, but we've only got 1, which means units haven't got very far to. There's not much leeway if one of their boats gets swamped. And I also got heavy surf. What heavy surf meant, and it was great for me, is that any landing craft coming up has to roll every turn. And on a 12, and also in the advanced phase, so essentially rolls twice a turn. On a 12, it gets swamped. And if you're swamped beyond shallow water, that's it, everything's lost. And 2, you can see these are the wrecks. 2 of these landing craft wrecked as they were coming in. Everything on board them lost. So that was a number of suspect counters that went down with their boats without me even having to worry about them. Then the other very fortunate thing that happened for me, as rolling out, one thing not very fortunate was I got pretty measly leaders. I got 2 8-0s and 1 7-0 leader. That essentially means that the worst you can get is 6 + 1, 7-0 is the next, and 8-0 is okay for a leader, but the 0 means they're giving no benefit for rallies and fire direction to their other units. What I was very fortunate with, though, was I got friendly reinforcements pre-mission, which happened to be an anti-tank gun section. So I got 3 40 LL anti-tank guns, and I set them essentially up. Oh, that one's turned, but I set one up here, so it's got covered up that row and then all the way along here. So it's sort of covering that. Then there's one in the middle here that yes, that was essentially covering there to there, and then this one here was covering over here, so that I had most of the ocean covered. And then I also I had a certain amount of fortification points. I spent a lot of them on putting these, they're called tetrahedrons. You probably remember them from Saving Private Ryan or something like that. So they're in the shallow water area there, and I just put, I had enough for 10 of them, because I brought some other things as well, and I thought I'd put them all there. If a landing craft hits one of those, there's a good chance it might break open and cause difficulties. So I wanted to kind of channel the landing craft coming this way, and then these 2 guns would have lots of shots at them, and this one I hoped would get some more. What it did mean was that this hex row along here was completely uncovered by my guns. Then the next thing I found was that although these guns were a great boon to me, and you can see here this one's been turned because essentially the Americans have landed, so that front line of defence is quickly becoming unviable. But what I found with these guns is that the 40 LL anti-tank guns are very good anti-tank guns, but they have no high explosive ammunition. So essentially what they can do is they would shoot, and if they hit a landing craft, essentially it would go straight through the landing craft and out the other side and cause minimal damage to it, except I had 1 lucky critical hit which did double damage. But on the other, so if they had high explosive, that could have caused lots of nasty damage. You can imagine all the soldiers and the tanks and so forth, the half tracks, what have you, packed in those landing craft. Could have done a lot of damage, and especially because we're on level 1 here, so we're on a higher level. So we weren't just shooting out at the front ramps or the front armour of these landing craft. Let me show you some of what we had. But we were actually able to shoot out, look into them and shoot sort of into them over the top in that unarmoured area. So we had a landing craft, vehicle, personnel one there. That's got 39 portage points. So that could carry 3 squads, some sort of sundry bits and bobs, that maybe a small tank. then here is or was a landing craft M3. Now that's 69. That could carry a tank, and maybe a squad or two, or 6 squads. And then there's another type here. That's landing craft A, LCA. Again, that's got a ramp. That could basically carry 3 squads or a small tank, maybe a half track. Yeah, and they all had ramps. Okay, and but then also what I quickly noticed is landing crafts are very different from most units. You see in the bottom left there's a DP number, DP3. This one's DP5, that other one's DP3. That is damage points. So every time you hit, even with HE, with anti-tank, you cause 1 damage point. So 3 hits, and I sunk these. So 2 or 3 of these sunk from the heavy surf, and the others I actually managed to sink as they came in, because one thing, anti-tank guns have a rate of fire, so if you roll 2 or less on your red die to hit, you get another shot. So with 1 critical and several other shots, and then 2, and it was actually the 3rd turn where a second wave came in. We're just about to start the 4th turn. I managed to take out a lot more than I thought I might of those landing craft. But then the final surprise was, I hadn't really checked out, there's a 4th landing craft type available in Europe in this. I think there's another one that I didn't have a counter for. This one, there was one that was on this hex row that I didn't have enough ocean for, so it was steadily making its way down here, and I just had to ignore it. I also, okay, I'll talk about that in a minute. And then it got to the landing, and I suddenly realised, look at that you see the PP, 540 PP. Now these other ones were 39, 69 PP. So that can carry 54 squads, or 10 tanks. So there's a bunch of stuff in that. You can see there's already essentially 9 squads, 2 leaders out there already, and then there's all of this on board, and this used up all the rest of the suspect counters. And I'm not sure, I think I should have kept a load of suspect counters on board and not rolled for them until they actually unload. But on the other hand, because I could see them, well, anyway, it doesn't really matter. But, there's not much I can do about it. They're there, and you see there's we've got I think it's a Sherman, and then M7, and then that last one's a medium tank. No, that's an M10, sorry. So they're not standing tanks. Yeah, sorry, that medium tank, that one with the 75, that's a Sherman, a sort of early Sherman. And then there's other 2 open-topped vehicles. But anyway, so there's 3 armoured vehicles, and then 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and then 6 more makes what? So 21 squads, and then mortars, heavy machine guns with teams, and all these leaders as well. They are all coming out in that corner, unmolested by me. So you can see the crew there has started moving away, pretty sharpish. But there was some, I had a machine gun team here, and they managed to fire at some fellows that were just here, sent them back into the water. So there's been some breaking and some rallying going on, but the Americans, but essentially they're breaking out. So how did I plan for all this? Well, originally I thought defence in depth is important. So I had the machine gun team there, and then the machine gun team there, 3 anti-tank guns, and then I had a machine gun in a pillbox. So I spent a lot on my fortifications to buy that pillbox. which has got a hefty, really strong defensive value. Ended up needing it right there. So the folks in there have moved out pretty sharpish. Nothing got to the beach. Sorry, there's one landing craft got to the beach here, and from some shooting from here, we got a... No, sorry, it was shooting from here. We got... oh, there's another land... Oh, no, yeah, I just turned that. That's that one, isn't it? Okay, yeah. I thought I'd missed out a landing craft. So you can see he's got his ramp down and he's aground, beached. What was I saying? Yeah, so that landing craft got in, but we brewed up the AFV which was in it, and caused a blaze. There was a little half squad that came along with it too, and that was quickly casualty reduced by the machine gun team there, so that didn't last long. So anyway, so my defence, so I thought, okay, and I had essentially I had 12 squads, 6 weapons teams, 2 half squads, and then 4 light machine guns, a heavy machine gun, medium machine gun. Yeah, you can just read it there. 3 anti-tank rifles, and then those reinforcement group, which will not stay with my squad. This squad will go with me throughout the whole campaign. Some will die, some will be replaced, but and the leaders can improve as the campaign goes on. So that's what I had. So I thought, okay, I put some forces up at the front, and then I split my squads. I had 4 across here, 4 across here, and then sort of 4 across here. Nice defence in depth. And I put my anti-tank rifles more or less like here and here, just to grab any tanks that were trying to move off board, because essentially the enemy wins if they get a certain amount of casualties against me and or move units off the board, the friendly board edge, that being this board edge here. So there's nothing happens, no one's going to go off those edges, and we win if they, at the end of 10 or more turns, there's kind of, you have to roll a die to see when exactly it's going to end, each turn after turn 9. If no enemy has gone off, then we, the friendly side, will win. So I thought I needed a defence in depth, but it became quickly apparent that I needed to get up to the beach, and if any of these, some of them were looking like they were going to get to the beach, I needed to take them out while they were on the beach in open ground and or wading ashore, because it's slow to come out, especially in heavy surf. It takes double the normal movement to come out, and onto heavy sand, which is 2 movement points rather than 1. So I thought, so I started moving guys up to get up, and then this landed, and so now I'm essentially sort of moving my forces over that way. So another thing that was great is because the hinterland is a level above the ocean and the beach, that means that none of this was in our line of sight, so these fellows could move in the open and not have their concealment removed, as they're completely out of the line of sight of any enemy. That, of course, is going to stop now pretty quickly. The Americans starting to get line of sight to all these fellows, so those will be stripped. So this is a situation now. I've got my 3 leaders. I think there's one I think's here, one's here. I can't remember where the other one is. But essentially they're trying to gather the forces, bring them over here, as this is obviously where the threat is. So the main line of attack's going to be down through here, and that is actually what I wanted, because you see this huge open ground area here. These are some trees, so they could get some cover from there, but they'll still have to cross the ground here. So I got a mortar here. We've got light machine gun here. And these guys are actually moving out. That's anti-tank rifle there. So they're going to move up to try and I had 1 point of mine I was able to buy. That's in the gap there. So there's a gap here. You can see the road doesn't join here, so the tanks will have to move through that gap or else risk bogs in the marsh there or going through the forests. So I'm moving my men up to here. That's a bit risky now. I'm seeing, because these guys, there's going to be so many of them. They'll probably start moving out pretty quick, because the Americans are powerful, lots of armaments, lots of machine guns and so forth. If they punch through that line and this is all I got behind, then it's game over. So it's now a matter of mustering my forces as quickly as possible. I was leaving anti-tank rifle and a mortar there, just in case for any surprise movements over here, but I think that's not going to happen. I think I'm just going to have to get them over here. The mortar can sort of chuck stuff that way. So that's the situation. It's jolly good stuff. It is great fun. It is slow learning and checking, and but now I've got to the point. I've finished with all the beach landing stuff. We're just moving them off that huge landing craft there, and moving them on. So it's going to go quicker for me because I had to learn all the beach stuff. Last interesting thing I should speak about was the enemy had some Americans, that is, had an interesting random event, which was you see that fire for effect marker. They had some off-board artillery. Now, because it's a beach assault scenario, that is naval off-board artillery. So again, that's some more rules, because I knew more or less the off-board artillery rules. I was a bit rusty on them, but I had some idea. And then I had to relearn it again a bit for naval off-board artillery, because that's obviously gunfire. It's not indirect fire as such, the classical sort of really high and then down, but it's more low level indirect, straight over the waves from the naval guns there. So a sort of very slight plunge in their fire. So now that is interesting because it's considered from level 1, so it's at the same height as the hinterland here. So it could, they could potentially shoot all the way and see all the way up to these trees here, but their line of sight is blocked beyond that. Because they fire at the nearest enemy, they picked on this, have to pick on that anti-tank gun there. Didn't quite get the hit a bit further, so they had a long shot. But it's also interesting, normal ASL, you have the 6 hexes around this are also the blast, so that it affects all those 6 hexes around as well as the 7th middle hex. But with the naval gunfire, you also affect this hex here and this hex here. So it's a longer blast area than just the total plunging fire of normal off-board artillery. So that has caused us some of our first casualties. We got a squad there that was moving along the road caught in that, and in their second turn of it, finally they redirected their fire because they couldn't see exactly what they were firing at over here because of the grain hindrance and so forth. Sorry, not because of the grain hindrance, but because of I think I made a mistake. I said because of the there's a hedge here, but actually that hedge strictly is covered by the beach overlay. It only comes into effect here. Well, anyway, they moved it back and took out their original target, or at least have broken them there. So exciting stuff, and I've taken on a big challenge with this campaign, but I can have a project. It will be on the back burner, if not on the front, for a long time, and I hope I stick to my promise to myself to do that. There's I said to myself I would play all of the missions, and that was original. I have a mixture. I have actually 2 Solitaire ASL things here, because I bought it individually at some point, and then I bought a fellow's collection of ASL stuff, and he had Solitaire ASL in that, but it was a bit incomplete because I found, although I had the 2nd edition, I didn't have the 2nd edition missions. I found them online, but the original one has 10 or 12 missions. With the 2nd edition, you've got 21 missions. I don't know if I'll get through 21 missions. I originally thought to 12, or 10 or 12, whichever it is, that would be doable. So I probably only just play that many. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, it's going to be a... ASL is the only game I played where you just get such exciting things like laying out your beach tetrahedrons and these landing craft coming forwards. They have to then hit the beach, lower their ramps, and I happen to have heavy surf going, which means the effect is heavy wind, so smoke's going to get blown away immediately. All these kind of exciting nuances in play. There's just so much in ASL. It sets a wonderful scene to get involved in. The last thing I'll just point out is my booby trap level. Now I could have bought some mines, but instead I converted most of them. As you saw, I got 1 point there, which is nothing really. I converted it to booby trap. Now what that means is that instead of, say, sprinkling a few hexes with mines to channel the enemy, the whole area is considered sprinkled with booby traps. So on certain rolls, if he makes, and I got level A, which is the best. So on 11 or 12, on certain rolls, they're going to set off a booby trap and cause nasty effects to them. So, it's that kind of thing. ASL, there's the planning. In this case, buying fortifications and deciding where they go, deciding how your defense is going to be, and then reacting to the enemy movements is just, you get such richness of opportunities in ASL. It really is a joy to play, and it takes a lot of study. You can see I got a plethora of books there and play aids, and I've also got 2 ring binders. As I said, I got amassed a bit of a collection of these. This has got the main rules rule books in it, and then this has got all the vehicle notes, which can be useful, and some extra things like this is the table you use for rolling for the off-board artillery, but actually that wasn't valid. I then had to use the rule from here, which is the rules for the beaches and the naval off-board artillery. And I've also got some historical modules in there as well. And then I got my own this for concealment, gain and loss, which I've annotated heavily to make it clear to me, on how routes work and so forth. Other people's play aids that I've annotated or not. This is basically a whole booklet full of play aids, and there's so much of this stuff out there that other people have built. Here's a very useful little booklet as such of all the phases, in turn, everything more or less that you will be considering to do within that. Movement phase, rally phase, etc. So the readable advanced sequence of play, because all of this was summarised on 2 sides of a single A4 sheet, so they made it readable. It's got an index, look at that. That's just for cross references to the rules. And here, this is a beauty, weather effects. The game I'm playing online is in deep snow. It's Parker's Crossroads Brac de Fracture in the Ardennes, one of the highest points in the Ardennes during the Battle of the Bulge. So sniper target selection flow chart, morale check flow chart, etc, 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 rally, etc. So a whole folder full of them. These are sort of esoteric motion bounding vehicular flamethrower firepower multipliers. Yeah, so various multipliers for firing vehicle flamethrowers, mounted fire or machine guns, etc. Defending infantry units options versus an AFE which enters its hex without declaring an overrun, or which uses vehicular bypass movement in its hex. Is it closed top and buttoned up? Is it closed up and crew exposed? Or is it open top, buttoned up, crew exposed? All of that, you see, summarised. You need that from ASL because it's all in the rule book, and it's really. And one thing which is, but there's you know all these esoteric things that are gathered together by very helpful peeps. But one thing I noticed, this is a big question: is ASL? Look, I mean the basic rule book is all of these. Yeah, and this is fun, isn't it? You got I got North Africa, but I had to sell it to come to Italy, so I photocopied the rules for that. I had it and I sold it, and I think I still got the counters because I had counters in a collection, but I only had one version of the rule book. But anyway, that's the you know, kind of like an expansion with the Brits in it, and that's the regular chapter, and someone's rewritten it in vernacular, so they say the same things but just in simple words. Open ground, the basic rules are the same, but the desert ground is harder, so there are a few differences. Now what is it in this thing here? Open ground, desert open ground is, or the open ground portion of is no different. So you can see that's the rulese and that's the vernacular. So that's this translated in the vernacular. But anyway, as I was saying, this is the main rule book. Now that is a lot of pages of text. It's small text, and as you can see, it's very detailed. You know, this is just an introductory portion, but ammunition, blah blah blah, all these details, blah blah blah, and the amount of errata, considering the detail in here, is minuscule compared to some other games that are, you know, 24 pages long, large type, maybe 2 columns like this too, with tons of errata, clarifications, misprints and so forth. How is it that they managed, and this was eons ago, you know, got modern technology, we've got the internet, you can spread out and people can proofread all over the globe. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. So yeah, I mean there is errata and there are clarifications, additions and or adjustments to the rules over the years, but not as much as you might thought this would warrant. Basically you get the rule book and you're good to go. So there it is, Beach Assault, dun dun dun, Solitaire ASL. I suppose what I should do is just do a wrap of this once it's all over, just in case someone's interested to see if the Yanks got through. I think they are. There's so many of them. I think what I'm going to have to do is basically withdraw my forces and let the scenario be lost, but let most of my forces not be destroyed. Sad to say, but discretion I think is going to be the better part of valour in this case.